Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Breakdown. It is January 21st, 2023, 2024. Damn it, I knew I was going to do that soon. I'm your host, Nate Pike, or what passes for one anyways. And we got a lot to talk about tonight. We're going the long haul tonight, I suspect, because there's a lot to talk about in Alberta politics. We're going to try to cover as much of it as we possibly can before we go to our regular call-in. I'm still not sure what to name it. Segment where if you're on the Twitter Spaces and you're listening to the live show, then you can hop on and share your thoughts and tell us what we got right and what we got wrong and other things, I guess. If you're listening to the audio version of the podcast, we're probably not on Twitter Spaces right now, so don't do that. But getting right into the start of things, we're going to start with a story that was kind of presented in a little bit of abstractions, but it's actually really, really important because it has some really big implications for not only the current state of the province of Alberta, but the future state of the province of Alberta. I'm talking about the report that the AER, or Alberta Energy Regulator, released on January 17th, where they talked about the liability that Albertans face in regard to orphan wells. Now, we've done a bunch of different episodes on this before, so I'm not going to go too far into it, but the long and the short of it is when an oil company drills a well, hopefully not too close to a dam that's susceptible to fracking, because that would be really bad. But when an oil company drills a well and they get all this stuff out and they go, ha, we got everything, then they can put a cap on it and just kind of leave it there for a while. Now, that stays in the oil company's inventory, and they have a responsibility to clean that up or to remediate the site. That means making sure that it's not just capped, but it's like fully shut down, completely, not going to leak anything, not going to do anything, and that all of the soil around the area is also cleaned up. That doesn't happen with the frequency or the urgency that a lot of people who pay attention to this issue would like to see. But what is even worse is sometimes what happens is that oil company will go, I bought too many Sea-Doos and I'm broke now, so I'm going to go bankrupt. Suckers! And then that oil well becomes an orphan well because there's no longer a company that's responsible for it to clean it up. That orphan well then goes to the Orphan Wells Association, and it's effectively up to taxpayers to cover the bill to clean up these wells, which is a big problem because in Alberta we have something called the polluter pays principle, which is that if you got the money out of the ground, you probably should have saved some of that money to clean up the thing. There's the whole abandoned wells, orphan wells, in a nutshell. Well, on January 17th, the AR released a report saying, hey, you know what? Here's the amounts of how much we've got. And a lot of people immediately went, whoa. You're saying there's only 33 billion that needs to be cleaned up? That seems like a profoundly low number. And it's important to understand how the AER says they got to that number and how everybody else disagrees. Now, in order to make some sense of this, there's some things that we got to talk about first. So first of all, the report highlighted that the amount spent on old well cleanup was nearly $700 million in 2022, which sounds like a really big number. But the problem with that number is more than half of that 700 million came from the federal government, which is to say more than half of the cleanup for the wells that oil companies did for their own wells. We're not even talking about the orphan wells here. We're just talking about companies, I got this well I'm not using. More than half of the cleanup was paid for by taxpayers. So again, we have oil companies making record profits over the last couple of years. They're cutting jobs because they're doing an amazing job with automation because technology. But taxpayers are subsidizing the cleanup of these wells through these payments that the federal government provided. But to get to this $33 billion estimate, of wells that needs to be cleaned up. You have to go back to an approach that was used basically for the last few years. But that approach has some problems, and it was actually called into question by the AER. So a few years ago, the AER had a 2019 presentation that was presented on liability challenges. This was presented by Robert Wadsworth, who is the Vice President of Closure and Liability. And he emphasized, hey, I think maybe we need to check our formula a little bit. And this graphic is one of the graphics that has made the rounds ever since then. Now this was released through a FOIP that was done by Drew Uchuk. And thanks to him for that, we're able to see this report. But you can see that when we're talking about the current state of liabilities and securities, the security collected is $1.6 billion. The liability that's been calculated is $57.8 billion. The liability that's estimated, so this is a different number, is $250 billion. Now the AR very quickly turned around and said, "Oh yeah, some of you guys, you got this thing where we talked about maybe there's some reports that have gone on, $260 billion in liability. We don't believe that. We think it's 58 billion." So there's been some back and forth over whether or not those numbers are accurate. But where it gets particularly mind-blowing is from a story, the one that's on the screen right now. I'll read from it just to save time. In total, the document suggests the liability estimates derived from Directive 11 that inform Wednesday's report were low by 263%. Martin Olshinsky said the report's liability figure was derived at least partly from estimates of well cleanup costs that were first published in 2015. That was pointed out in March by Alberta's Auditor General, but they're still being used, Olshinsky said. How are they still publishing numbers that they know are incorrect, he said. Dave Hardy, the regulator's manager of liability management, acknowledged the liability estimate is wobbly. And this is where it gets wild, because the quote that comes from the regulator's manager of liability management is, "We can't say it's an underestimate or an overestimate." So the group that are responsible for estimating how much debt, what the liability is that exists for oil wells in the province of Alberta, don't know if their own estimate is an overestimate or an underestimate, which isn't great. But the really important thing to highlight in all of this is, even if we go with the AER's estimate, and here's the estimates for the last few years, even if we go with these estimates, then we're still looking at $33.3 billion of oil wells that need to be cleaned up. Now, to be clear, that's a very low number. And we've done, like I said, several episodes where we've had several people who know way more about this stuff than we claim to, where they've said, actually, if you take a look at it over the next 10 years, we're on the way to like a $250 billion, which is a really big number. Certainly more than the $5 billion surplus that Danielle Smith and the UCP ran around the block saying, hooray, we did such a great job. Because even with the $5 billion surplus, we're still looking at $33 billion in potential liabilities. It's bad news bears, and it's something that we could very easily be passing on to the next generation of Albertans. Moving on from there, we're going to talk a little bit for the next, I don't know, it depends on how long-winded I am, about policing, because there's some interesting information that has come up in regards to policing and police spending. And there's also some interesting information as to how it's being executed in the province of Alberta. We're going to talk about all of those things. So the first thing that we want to talk about is a new Canadian study that was just released that took a look at municipalities all across Canada. So it's a Canadian-specific study. We're not looking at something in Europe or Belgium, which is technically in Europe. The municipal spending on police has mainly increased steadily since 2010 across Canada. Police services were the top operating expenditure for 60% of the municipalities that the study looked at in 2019. They revealed, looking at all of these different municipalities, looking at all of these different budgets, some municipalities spending way more, some municipalities spending less. Their analysis revealed no consistent correlation between police funding and crime rates across municipalities. It's almost as if policing, by and large, is responsive. A crime happens, the police get called. Now, I want to be really clear. We're not knocking the police here, okay? There is a lot of proactive policing that gets done as well. There's a lot of education programs that different police departments utilize, but not all police departments are able to utilize those education programs, and not all police departments utilize them in the same way or with the same enthusiasm or the same commitment. So there's variables here. But at the end of the day, this report seems to underscore what many people have been saying for quite some time already. When you're talking about the vast majority of crime, it's not being completed or conducted by people who are just looking to have some fun. It's being done by people who are committing these crimes because they believe that it's what they need to do to get by, or because of other social issues that are driving it. And what the report seems to strongly suggest is, if you want to address crime, dumping money into a crime happened, we should send people to deal with it and catch the bad guys, which is all really important stuff, not minimizing that. But dumping money just into that doesn't do anything to address the root causes of crime. If you want to do that kind of thing, then you have to take a look at what the underlying issues are that are driving the various different types of crime that are out there. And you have to have that conversation in an empirical and evidence-based way, which many people are saying is not necessarily happening all that well right now. And perhaps one of the best ways that we can find an example of that is by looking at a new bylaw that the city of Edmonton is talking about. So in this new bylaw, there's a bunch of different things that they're looking at potentially making illegal. Now, some people would probably say, "Oh, that seems like a really good idea." So, for example, there's certainly some people that are excited about the idea of banning public drug use, even though that's a strange little beast to try to enforce. And it was tried out on the West Coast, and there was a charter challenge, and it's a whole thing. We're gonna try to get a legal expert on to have a conversation about that in the next couple of weeks, because it's way out of our realm of expertise. But that's the kind of severity of the issue that we're talking about here. City bylaw officers can fine people $500 for openly possessing or consuming a controlled substance anywhere in public. This is happening at a special meeting on February 2nd. But some of the other things that they're looking at banning are loitering on transit. Now, loitering on transit turns into a complicated question really quick, because there are a lot of homeless and houseless individuals, particularly during the types of cold snaps that we've had recently here in Alberta, who use transit as a means to get warm. And while it might be visually off-putting, I guess, to see a homeless person or a houseless person on the same C-train line that you're on, they're doing it to stay alive. And they're doing it because they clearly don't have access to or don't feel safe utilizing some of the existing shelters that may or may not be in place. So when you're talking about that demographic, throwing down a fine on those people, not only it's not going to get paid, so now you're looking at, if you want to pursue those fines, and now you're looking at increased costs to the taxpayer to try to recoup those fines that they're not going to be able to pay anyways. And if they get enough tickets for the same thing, then they're going to end up having to do a time served, going to jail kind of situation for a couple of days. Gets them out of the cold, but it also ends up costing taxpayers, because now taxpayers are having to put that person in jail, which is a lot more expensive than simply putting them in housing. They're also looking at potentially banning panhandling near roads, which again is dissonant because if you're going to charge someone a fine for panhandling and they're panhandling to make ends meet, it raises a lot of questions about, again, how are they going to pay that fine? How many tickets are they going to have to get before it turns into an incarceration type situation, which doesn't do anybody any good. Having conversations about how we can actually address some of these issues without criminalizing poverty and criminalizing the houseless and the homeless is a really important conversation that we need to have. But we're not doing a great job of having it in this province right now at all. And you don't have to go very far for other examples of announcements that demonstrate that. Because we also saw this week a new announcement, and there's a lot to unpack here. This gets really complicated really quick. And I should probably drag up the cancel clock. There we go. We're nice and close to midnight. Because I'm gonna say some things that are probably gonna get some people a little bit annoyed here. But to start with, the announcement was that the Alberta government is opening an Edmonton support center for what to do with people when they close encampments. So as many people have pointed out on social media and in conventional media, a lot of these encampment areas that are being closed, they're ripping up the tents, they're ripping up the tarps, they're shooing the people on, and within 72 hours, they pop up again because, again, we haven't addressed the underlying issues. You've destroyed those people's things and you've taken away their stuffs, but we haven't addressed the underlying issues of why they're there. Why aren't they in the shelters? We haven't had that fulsome conversation. And there were some, let's go with props that got rolled out at this event, this press conference. We're throwing up a tweet on the screen here from the progress report, where their editor Duncan Kenny attended, and he took some pictures of the visual aids, the props. They had a tent that was on fire. They had some debris, and then they had this. Oh my gosh, this is such a scary picture. Except it's not. So this is a picture of a variety of, let's go with edged things, and a couple of replica firearms. Now, to the average layperson, you might look at this and go, oh, that's a lot of knives. They're really scary. But to anybody who knows anything about knives, you look at this and goes, that's a collection. This is a bunch of decorative knives. That is a collection. And really, there's only one item on this entire table that is potentially illegal, and that's assuming that it's actually what it appears to be, and that would be the brass knuckles. Now, how do we know what's actually on the table? Well, a little while ago, the Edmonton Police Service released, in effect, an inventory count of what all of this stuff was. They found a hard golf travel case. So again, all in one place, almost as if it's somebody's collection. They found 10 samurai swords, 11 machetes, 34 knives, including folding and fixed blade knives, and one they claim is a butterfly knife. Although everybody on the team has looked at these pictures, we can't find the butterfly knife to save our lives. 2 axes, brass knuckles, which would be the illegal thing, collapsible baton, an imitation AK-47 pellet gun, and an imitation AR-15 Crossman BB gun. So again, the only thing in the pictures that would potentially be illegal would be the brass knuckles. But nonetheless, that context very clearly left out. It's a scary picture. There's a lot of knives and gun-looking things. And if you don't know your gun-looking things, then it looks like those guns are really dangerous. But it's entirely conceivable that that could be the collection of somebody who lost their home. And having those things in a golf case is not illegal. To be clear, it's not illegal at all. But it was apparently confiscated for reasons. Now, there's some other things that we got to talk about with this announcement, because there's some other things that are going on with this announcement. One of the biggest ones is there's been a whole lot of talk about Edmonton. There's been the encampment breakdowns in Edmonton. There's been this new navigation center that is going to be triaged, apparently, by the Edmonton Police Service. So as much as Jason Nixon and friends stood up and said, well, you know what, we're going to have this thing where if somebody wants to come on the bus, they can come on the bus, and then we'll take them to the place, and then they can get some supports. We'll have different buses that can take them to shelters, because it's really more of a navigation center. It's not so much a shelter itself. There will be some beds in case we're ripping up encampments in the middle of the night, I guess. But it'll get people plugged into social services, and all of that sounds very, very good. But one of the other things that they say is somebody has the choice between going on the bus or going about their day or going into treatment, or if they have warrants, then it becomes maybe they get shuffled off in another direction. And the people making this determination as to what's the most appropriate route are apparently going to be the Edmonton Police Service. Now, you can get a warrant issued for not having paid tickets. So this could turn into a really expensive, complicated thing really, really quickly. And it could see a lot of people who are just trying to do their best to survive on the streets, who haven't committed a violent crime. Maybe some have. Those ones probably should be arrested. But the ones who haven't committed a violent crime, they're going to be sleeping in their tents. And then all of a sudden the police are going to show up and say, hey, we're taking all of your stuff. We're ripping up your tent. And by the way, we found a warrant. So now you're going to jail. There's a lot of context that's missing. And one of the questions that's been raised is this whole thing a step towards the forced treatment? Danielle Smith and the UCP have been very clear coming into the next legislative session, which is a doozy, and we're going to be talking about in a bit, but coming into the next legislative session, one of the big things that they're going to be focusing on is the forced treatment, where they're going to be taking people and saying, you've been using the drugs and we don't like that, so we're going to force you into treatment. Now, the parameters for what's going to trigger that have been very poorly defined and very poorly explained by pretty much everybody. So nobody knows what's going on. But it's not a great look when a mechanism is being built in Edmonton that's going to allow the police to round up homeless people and then decide where it is that they're going to go. But there's a bigger issue that we need to talk about with this whole announcement. And before we get to it, we're going to play this little clip that occurred during the press conference where Minister of Public Safety and hiring Western Standard creative writers to be their press secretaries, apparently, had some thoughts that he wanted to share.
Reconciliation is not just words, it is actions. And that's what this is. We are trying to provide safe places for our vulnerable population. We are trying to protect them from being preyed upon by organized crime, by Red Alert, by other gangs. Does anybody out here think that it is right to be charged a fee to use a water fountain? To be charged to even walk down the street or use or go under an underpass? Because that's what's happening. And so when you have questions regarding Indigenous people, it's not to go to the activists. I ask you, I implore you. We have Grand Chief Thomas here, and I'm going to ask him to supplement what I have to say.
The question was about the timeline.
I can speak for it. I'm going to answer that in just a bit of a different way. And
So let's walk through what happened there. Mike Ellis stands up and says, hey, there's these gangs. They're charging people to use water fountains. They're charging people to use underpasses, and that's not cool. So we need to do something about that. That in and of itself is not an unreasonable argument. One might argue that the solution would not be to focus on the houseless and homeless people, and instead maybe the solution would be to target the people that are doing those things. But I guess if you just get rid of the prey, then the predators will go away and absolutely not move on to other things. I don't think that's actually how that works. So it's a little bit of a weird logical fallacy that Minister Ellis is throwing out there. Because his whole argument seems to be, hey, we got to stop the homeless people from trying to walk under the overpasses where the red alert will come and charge them money to walk under the overpasses. But there's two other pieces, at least, that are really important to talk about. The first one is where Mr. Ellis says, don't talk to the activists. Now, I've referenced it many times on the show before. I'm going to reference it again here now. We did an episode a long while back, where we went out and we did a walk along. Well, we did a whole conversation with some of the core members of a street outreach group here in Calgary called the Street Cats. And they allowed us to join them on a walk along where they were working with and supporting the houseless and homeless population here in Calgary. And I've said it in many places before, and I'm going to say it again. The relationships that this organization has built with the houseless and the homeless population was absolutely mind-blowing to see. The trust and the comfort that existed between the people that the Street Cats were serving and the houseless and the homeless, many of whom were in fact Indigenous, was one of the most humbling things I've ever seen in my entire life. So to say and to discount the work of organizations like the Street Cats or the Bear Clan, who come to it from a specifically Indigenous First Nations perspective, to discount them when they're working with these people and building these relationships is pretty arrogant, dangerous, ignorant. There's lots of different words I could use to describe it. But anytime somebody's saying, hey, don't go talk to the people who are actually volunteering their time to deal with this stuff firsthand, don't talk to them. That part of the statement alone is enough to go, well, I don't know about that. But here's where it gets more complicated. I feel like I should grab the cancel clock again. If the only representation that you're choosing to engage with when we're talking about Indigenous, First Nations, Métis issues is elected chiefs, we have a bit of a problem. Because the whole structure for elected chiefs in Canada is a byproduct of the Indian Act. And the Indian Act is a dumpster fire that was created to erase First Nations, Indigenous, Métis cultures. So to say the only stakeholders that we're going to engage, the only stakeholders that we think you should be looking at for representation on these issues are the ones that our institutions created is a little bit problematic. This is one of the reasons why people have such a difficult time understanding a lot of the issues that are going on in British Columbia with unceded territories and the questions around pipelines, because there are different, in effect, and practice branches of leadership in many of these bands, in many of these nations. And I want to be really, really clear here. It might sound like I'm speaking about First Nations and Indigenous and Métis people as a monolith. That's absolutely not what I'm trying to do here, because there's differences across the board. But if you want to talk about really connecting with Indigenous First Nations cultures, then you have to have conversations about the hereditary leadership, because those are the keepers of the culture in many, many ways. And the fact that Mike Ellis is disregarding all of that existing leadership and choosing only to invoke the products of the Indian Act leadership is really quite problematic. And again, I want to be really clear here. I am not in any way trying to disrespect or denigrate the elected leadership, because there's a lot of people inside of a lot of bands and a lot of nations who recognize this is the only way that we get to have a voice at the table, because this is the only thing that these institutions that created the Indian Act will acknowledge. So it's a bit of a shit show. But if we don't acknowledge that it's a bit of a shit show, then we're right back to just doing what we want to do, and we get really, really close to where maybe instead of governments actually doing consultation, are not just using pictures of knives as props. They're using other things too. Now, there's a couple of things that we got to tack into the end of here, because one of the things that followed up after this was a tweet by Premier of Alberta, Danielle Smith. And to call this tweet insensitive, a comms train wreck, is probably a bit of an understatement. Danielle Smith tweeted out on January 18th. So this is Thursday. Alberta is building a network of 10 therapeutic communities across the province where patients can stay for up to a year, receiving therapy and medical treatment and developing skills that will enable them to build a life outside of the drug culture. And then she quotes an article from the Financial Post. The quote from the Financial Post on the graphic is, Alberta is trying a different approach, one focused on helping addicts to get off drugs. The early results seem promising. And then there's a picture of a bunch of people laughing. I don't know why. I mean, Danielle Smith reportedly wasn't even in Canada when this article was released, so it's certainly not a picture of her and her staff going, "Aha! Our thing works." It was a choice by the people running her communications to say, "Hey, you know what picture would pair well with we're trying to help addicts getting off drugs? How about everybody just laughing a lot?" Peak Alberta, right there. Moving on from there. We've got, nope, not that one yet. Okay, maybe it is that one. Let's talk about Tucker. I was going to do the kidney thing, but apparently we're skipping the kidney thing. We'll come back to the kidney thing. Let's talk about Tucker. So Tucker Carlson is coming to Calgary January 24th. And he's also coming to Edmonton on January 24th. There's a lot of people who've raised a lot of concerns about why is Tucker Carlson coming to Alberta, because it's Tucker Carlson, and that's not great. But here we are. He's coming in just a couple of days. It's 3 days till Tucker Carlson Day. But where it gets particularly problem is the event in Calgary on the 24th is a lunchtime event, and then the event in Edmonton is an evening event, and it's just a train wreck of bad and dishonesty. The lunchtime event is a speech by Tucker Carlson where he's going to talk about I don't know, the importance of the United States invading Canada. No, wait, he did that one already. Followed by a Q&A with Brett W. Wilson. And then there's an interview with Danielle Smith. And the question that has yet to be clarified publicly is who is interviewing whom? Because there's no great answer to that either way, because if Tucker Carlson is interviewing Danielle Smith and she's agreed to do this at a for-profit event, that's not fantastic. And if Danielle Smith is interviewing Tucker Carlson and asking Tucker Carlson questions, that's even worse, because how does the Premier of Alberta turn into the hype person for Mr. Hatemonger? There's a lot of questions that need to be answered there. So that's the daytime event. We got Brett W. Wilson, we've got Danielle Smith, and we've got Tucker Carlson. The evening event, though, is where things get a little bit more complicated. We're going to talk about that in just a sec. A lot of people have asked, why is Danielle Smith even doing this event? Why is she why is she agreed? And she has justified it, or her office has justified it, by saying it's a great opportunity to talk about Alberta's invest energy, because Tucker's got a big audience. So I'll take every opportunity that I can to talk about Alberta oil and gas, which again opens up a whole bunch of really uncomfortable questions. Because one of the first uncomfortable questions has to be, so like if Putin said, "Hey, Danny, wanna come talk to Mother Russia about Alberta oil and gas," would she take up that invitation? Where's the moral line? Because according to the official statements that have come from Danny's office, there's not one, which isn't great for the Premier of Alberta. But the evening event is where things get especially spicy. He's going to be having a conversation with Conrad Black and Rex Murphy. So those are two pretty polarizing figures. But the MC of the evening is really where we've got to land, because, and I wish I was making this up, but I'm not. It's like they went through, who are the most controversial figures that we could possibly involve in this event? Who are the people that are going to make the most heads explode? Let's get them, because the MC for the evening is none other than Justice Center for Constitutional Freedom's guy, John Carpay. And they're selling the tickets out of their donations link, which raises a bunch of questions. The JCCF is a bit of a problematic, it's a challenging organization, because they are a charity nonprofit. And so when you donate money to the JCCF, you get a tax receipt back. And if you're selling tickets for a hate rally, I don't know, and people are getting tax receipts back, that's kind of gross. But it's worth revisiting a little bit about Mr. Carpay. One of the things that's worth remembering about John Carpay is that he's not allowed to practice law in Manitoba anymore. And why, you might ask? Well, let me answer that question for you. The reason that John Carpay isn't allowed to practice law in Manitoba anymore is because the JCCF was involved in this case about the COVID stuffs. And John Carpay was like, haha, I know what allegedly will influence this case. What if I hired a private investigator to follow the judge who's trying the case, and if I can catch him not following COVID restrictions, haha, which is super illegal and a wild breach of ethics for a lawyer. So he got in some trouble for that. He's not allowed to practice law in the province of Manitoba, and there's been some speculation that may very well extend to Alberta, because it turns out, as the Law Society of Alberta has said, is that, hey, you know what? If you do an illegal lawyer thing in one province, there's a chance you might try to do it in another one, and so maybe there should be some consequences across the board. Worth noting that the judge who heard the case called hiring a private investigator nothing short of an affront on the administration of justice. But that's not all that Mr. Carpay is known for. He's famous for, he ran for the Wild Rose when Danny was the leader. So, they go back. He issued some, he was at a Rebel News rally, and he issued some comments about the rainbow flag. He said it's not, it doesn't matter whether it's a hammer or sickle for communism, or whether it's the swastika for Nazi Germany, or whether it's the rainbow flag, the underlying thing is a hostility towards individual freedoms. So that's not super great. He actually, we had him on the show a few years ago, and we gave him the opportunity to apologize, and he had a meeting that he had to get to. And I wish I was making that up, but He refused to apologize. He thought it was unfortunate that there were some people who were offended, but that's the price of free speech. So personal responsibility, I guess, only extends so far. I don't know. But where it gets really interesting is, as we've talked about on the show many times before, the JCCF, the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, was the recipient of a not insignificant amount of money from Daniel Smith. During COVID, before Daniel Smith decided she was going to run for the UCP leadership race, she decided that she was going to put up a GoFundMe. And this GoFundMe was going to be to create enough money to do two things. There's two stated things that she wanted to do. One was she wanted to sue the federal government for not having enough of the supply of the vaccine that she wanted, because that's how global supply chains work during a global pandemic. It's not at all. She dropped that after there was enough supply that showed up in Canada. The other thing that she wanted to do was file a lawsuit so that doctors could prescribe things for COVID that aren't for COVID, because doctors wanted to do that, except no doctors wanted to actually pursue that. She couldn't get any doctors that said, no, I will totally stand up and say, despite the complete lack of evidence for this drug having any kind of efficacy when it comes to COVID, I'm the kind of doctor that just likes to do a Hail Mary. Damn the science. She couldn't get any doctors to stand up and say that. Fascinatingly. So she ended up having almost $100,000 that was just sitting there. And so what do you do with $100,000 when you're in the UCP leadership race? You donate at least $60,000 to the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. Now, we've asked over and over and over again, hey, Danny, did you get a tax receipt on that $60,000 that you raised for a GoFundMe for a lawsuit that never happened? We can't seem to get an answer. So I guess that'll just go down as one of the mysteries of all time. But that's Mr. Carpe. He's just the MC. He's not the main event, the center attraction, the Tucker Carlson. So let's take a second to talk about why maybe Tucker Carlson could be so problematic. And a lot of it comes down to there's no shortage of places where Tucker Carlson has said really, really horrifying things. But one of the biggest revelations, and perhaps one of the things that maybe give some people pause as to whether or not he's even worth listening to, is the fact that there was a lawsuit in the States around the Dominion voting machines. Dominion was the company that manufactured the voting machines. Fox News went on and on and on about how, the Dominion voting machines, they're not secure. They could be hacked. They fixed the election. Donald Trump should have won. It was a stolen election, January 6th, not that bad. And during the discovery phase of that lawsuit, there were a boatload of text messages that came out that show that not only was there a boatload of Fox and Friends news personality types who were somehow okay knowing that what they were saying was utter bullshit, but still saying it. I'll read a couple of excerpts here from the New York Times. Newly disclosed text messages and testimony from some of the biggest stars and senior executives at Fox News revealed that they privately expressed disbelief about President Donald J. Trump's false claim that the 2020 election was stolen from him, even though the network continued to promote many of those lies on air. Carlson writes of Trump. This is Tucker Carlson talking about Donald Trump. The same Tucker Carlson who was on the air talking about how the election was stolen January 6th. That was just a little picnic. He's a demonic force, a destroyer, but he's not going to destroy us. I've been thinking about this every day for 4 years. Addressing Trump's 4 years as president, Carlson said, we're all pretending that we got a lot to show for it because admitting what a disaster it's been is too tough to digest. But come on, there really isn't an upside to Trump. Again, that's Tucker Carlson talking about Donald Trump. On November 12th, in a text chain with Ms. Ingraham and Mr. Hannity, Mr. Carlson pointed to a tweet in which a Fox reporter, Jackie Heinrich, fact-checked a tweet from Mr. Trump referring to Fox broadcasts and said there was no evidence of voter fraud from Dominion. Please get her fired, Mr. Carlson said. He added, it needs to stop immediately, like tonight. It's immeasurably hurting the company. The stock price is down, not a joke. So Tucker Carlson knew the Dominion story was BS. And when a Fox News reporter said, hey, it might be BS, Tucker Carlson said, somebody should fire her because stock prices. That's how integrity works. So it should be very clear that Tucker Carlson appears to be somebody who's happy to mislead his audience as long as he's making some money out of it. Now, he was reportedly fired as part of the settlement with Dominion. So part of the agreement that Fox News had with Tucker Carlson was allegedly contingent on Tucker being shown the door. Tucker Carlson was fired from Fox News. But there's a lot of things, even if we just ignore the tweets and the text messages, particularly the text messages that came out through this Dominion discovery process, there's a lot to talk about in regards to things that Tucker Carlson has just said on the record. We're going to run through a few of his greatest hits from a Rolling Stone article. Carlson credited white men for creating civilization because it was the white folks that made the maths. No, wait, that's not right. And when recording, the Fox host, previously a staunch defender of the war in Iraq, said he felt no sympathy for Iraqis, calling them semi-illiterate primitive monkeys. He went on to say that Afghanistan would never be a civilized country because the people aren't civilized. In December of 2018, Carlson accused immigrants coming to the United States of making the country poorer and dirtier and more divided. Carlson repeatedly warned viewers that Democrats were importing new citizens to replace the disobedient ones. Carlson once likened the Biden administration immigration policy to eugenics against white people. In the aftermath of a 2019 shooting in El Paso Walmart, which was carried out by a man looking to target immigrants, Carlson claimed that the concept of white supremacy was a hoax. But in its immediate aftermath, Carlson pushed that mail-in voting had contributed to fraud, that dead people had voted for Biden en masse, and had hosted election conspiracy theorists Sidney Powell and Mike Lindell. Regarding the January 6th attack on the Capitol, Carlson claimed that violent protesters who reached the building were orderly and meek. They were not insurrectionists, they were sightseers. In November of 2021, Carlson released a two-part special on Fox streaming service Fox Nation titled Patriot Purge. The special argued that January 6th was a false flag attack orchestrated by the government to usher in a purge of Republican voters. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. But this is also the person that Danielle Smith has agreed to sit down with and do an interview or be interviewed by. We're still not sure. In 3 days. There has to be a line, one would think, in regards to who are the people that you're going to try to sell Alberta's energy industry to. And one would think you wouldn't sit down for a jovial conversation with somebody who has repeatedly expressed these views, even though it's completely up for debate whether or not he actually holds them. He just knows that he can get people to give him a lot of money for saying the most ridiculous, extreme stuff possible. Now, I could probably do another half hour on the problems of Tucker Carlson. But, as it turns out, we don't care if this episode gets monetized or not. So we're probably going to get us a little copyright flag on what we're about to share here. Because we got 2 videos that we want to show you where the master himself, best of the best, can't be beat. I miss him so much. I want him to come back. Please come back, John. Addresses the questions of Tucker Carlson. If you haven't seen it already, it's worth watching the whole thing. We've taken a couple of clips and put together a couple of clips of the the one and only, the great, I would argue the greatest, appearing on the show Crossfire that Tucker Carlson was a host of. This was a little while back. But the one and only Jon Stewart sums it up 20 years ago in 2004 about as best as anyone possibly could.
Debate show. It's like saying the Weather Channel reduces
that'd be
everything
great.
to a storm.
I would love to see a debate
in a
show.
24-hour day where we have each side on as best we can get them,
That would be great.
and have them fight it out.
To do a debate would be great, but that's like saying pro wrestling is a show about athletic
I'm
competition.
Sorry. I think you're a good comedian. I think your lectures are boring. Let me ask you a question on the news.
Now, this is theater. I mean, it's obvious. How old are you?
35.
And you wear a bow tie.
Yeah, I do. I do.
So,
I do.
so this is.
No, I know.
So this
You're
is
right.
theater.
No, let me just go. No, come on.
And listen, I'm not suggesting that you're not a smart guy, because those are not easy to tie. But the thing is that you're doing theater when you should be doing debate, which would be great.
No, it's just
It's not honest. What you do is not honest. What you do is partisan hackery. You have a responsibility to the public discourse, and you
need to get
fail
a job at a journalism
miserably.
school, I think.
You need to go to one. The thing that I want to say is, when you have people on for just knee-jerk, reactionary talk.
Wait, I thought you were going to be funny. Come on, be funny.
No, I'm not going to be your monkey.
Go ahead.
I watch your show every day, and it kills me.
I can tell you love
it's so painful to watch. You know, because we need what you do. This is such a great opportunity you have here to actually get politicians
Is this really Jon
off
Stewart?
of their
What is this
marketing
anyway?
and strategy. Yeah, it's someone who watches your show and cannot take it anymore. I just can't.
What's it like to have dinner with you? It must be excruciating. Do you like lecture people like this? Or do you come over to their house and sit and lecture them? And, you know, they're not doing the right thing, that they're missing their opportunities, evading their responsibilities?
If I think they are.
Look, I wouldn't want to eat with you, man. That's horrible.
I know, and you won't. But the thing I want to get
We did
to...
promise naked pictures of the Supreme
Yeah, we
Court.
did. Let's get to those.
Why
Which are in this book,
why
which is a
can't we
very
just
funny
talk?
book.
Please, I beg of you guys.
I think you
Please.
watch too much Crossfire. We're going to take a quick break.
No. Look,
No, hold on.
please.
Joe. We've got commercials. Hold on.
Please.
Next,
Please
Jon Stewart
stop.
in the rapid fire.
Please
Hopefully
stop.
I do think you're more fun on your show. Just my opinion.
but can-
okay,
just-
next, Jon Stewart goes
You know what's
one-on-one with
interesting,
his
though?
fans.
You're as big
See
a
if he
dick
can
on your
answer the
show as you are on any show.
Yeah, you might watch that clip or listen to that clip and go, but that was 2004. Maybe Tucker's evolved. Maybe Jon Stewart's changed his mind. Fortunately, in 2023, he set the record pretty clear.
Just said the malevolence
Yeah.
and versus the ignorance. There's several examples of you doing that in popular media. Your famous takedown of Tucker Carlson, in which you were self-deprecating. You were like, "Look, I come on after puppets, you know," but you were in his face and confronting some of the ignorance and some of the evil. This has happened with Bill O'Reilly. On your new show, you call the CEO of Shell evil to his face. You say to this man, he says, "I expected you to have a black mustache to twirl. You're the villain of this story." It's the first thing you say to the CEO of Shell.
To your point, though, about like a guy like Tucker Carlson, like that's cynical. What he does is cynical.
Right.
And he hides the true motivation for it. And that's what I mean by the difference between well-intentioned, honest brokering and cynical manipulation.
Yeah, I definitely put him on the evil side. I wasn't going to speak for you, but
No.
for me, I put him in the...
No question.
I feel like he knows exactly what he's doing and saying.
No question.
I don't feel like he's ignorant about his messaging and his coding.
No, it's all purposeful,
Yeah.
and it's marshaling very, very malevolent forces.
Yes.
No question.
There you go. Anybody who knows me knows how much respect I have for Jon Stewart. And when the man has said the thing, there's really not that much that you can possibly add to it. So we're going to leave it there. And we're going to move on to talk about the other little bit of news that came out this week in regards to the upcoming legislative session. They release a little calendar every once in a while where they say, "Hey, here's what the plan is. Here's what we're going to do. Here's the score, if you will." And they did that, and it's not great. They're very busy. They're very, very busy this time around, and there's going to be a lot of things that are happening. To give you an idea of how busy they're going to be, we decided to put the legislative calendar from last year up against the legislative calendar from this year to really give you the full flavor of just how different the two calendars are, because they're very, very, very different. To start with, if we take a look at the 2023 calendar, they were in session for 5 weeks. If we dare to take a look at the 2024 calendar, and we choose to count up how many totally days or how many weeks are they going to be doing the things for, it's longer. It's 16 weeks. Now, we've seen from Danielle Smith cutting the legislation session short, not once, but twice now, that she's okay with if there's not that much work to do. It doesn't matter if the schools have scheduled kids to come in and see how the legislature works and how the sausage gets made and all of that. To hell with all that. I wanna get on my vacation time earlier. She has no problems doing that. So the fact that there has been this much time scheduled should strongly indicate how much legislating is going to be going on, because it certainly appears that there's going to be a lot. And when we take a look at the kind of things that Danielle Smith has said that she's going to be looking at legislating throughout this legislative session, we're talking about multiple Sovereignty Act things on all of the things, because that's Stephen Guilbeault. We're talking about the forced treatment. Now, the whole legislative session is going to be starting up pretty quick. It's going to be starting up in March. And this is where it's going to be really important for the average Albertan, if you will, to be paying as much attention as possible and to being as engaged as much as possible. Because this is a not small legislative agenda that the UCP and Danielle Smith are bringing to the table. And it's all going to be going on during an NDP leadership race. Because, as we know, Rachel Notley announced this week that she's going to be stepping down. And we're going to take a couple minutes to talk about that a little bit, because there's some things that we definitely need to talk about a little bit in regards to Rachel Notley stepping down. So, to get that show on the road, Rachel Notley announced not too long ago, just a couple of days ago, in a one of the most, it happened sooner than a lot of people thought. Everybody was saying, it's going to be late January, early February. There was a lot of speculation in regards to, hey, the NDP, there were rumors that the NDP was just not insignificantly in debt coming out of the last election, and Rachel was going to stick around until all of that debt was cleared up. Maybe the debt's cleared up, but nonetheless, one way or the other, she announced just a few days ago that that was the end of the Rachel Notley era. On January 16th, Rachel Notley held a bit of a press conference. We're going to play a few clips.
Considered what I believe to be the best interests of our party, our caucus, as well as my own preferences, I'm here today to announce that I will not be leading Alberta's NDP into the next election. I have informed both the senior officers of Alberta's NDP as well as my caucus and staff that upon the selection of a new leader, I will be stepping down from that role.
So there you go. After years in provincial politics, Rachel Notley announced on January 16th that she was going to be stepping down as leader of the NDP in what was one of the worst kept secrets in Alberta politics, because we've seen a couple of the leadership contenders, nobody's officially announced yet, but they've announced without officially announcing. We know some of the big names that are kicking the tires, and they're kicking pretty hard. Catherine Ganley has released a video where she introduces herself, and she talks about all of the things that she cares about. We have Sarah Hoffman. Many people are saying is going to be the natural successor to Rachel Notley. There's a lot of speculation that Sarah Hoffman is actually Rachel Notley's preference. Now, of course, Rachel Notley is not likely to endorse any given candidates throughout the race because she's going to be staying on as leader up until the race is done. So this is going to unfold in very much the same way that the Jason Kenney leadership race unfolded. By any stretch of the imagination, done with Rachel as of yet. But there were some questions in regards to, hey, what does this mean for your political future? There's a lot of people who have said, the federal NDP, they've been doing terribly lately. The current leader of the federal NDP doesn't seem to be resonating. The federal NDP seem to be losing ground. They don't seem to be able to connect with people. How do we turn that ship around? Oh, you know who would be great? Rachel Notley. Well, Rachel Notley made fairly clear that's not at all the plan.
Being vague about, of course, the MLA, what's going to happen with that is in the future, but one thing you're still being relatively vague on it, do you have any interest in any other venues, political venues, like federal politics? Does that interest you moving into the federal arena?
Absolutely not. I have no intention to pursue a federal role in elected politics.
So are you leaving politics then altogether if you stay on as an MLA, but that has a finite term to it? And are you just leaving politics?
I am not interested in pursuing federal politics at this time, and that is the answer to that question, because I noticed some people had that question, and that is the answer to that question.
And sorry, federal politics, you can come back in provincial politics at some level then?
No, Graham. I think I've done a good amount of time, and so I think, as I say, my focus is on leading the caucus through this session and supporting the new leader as that person believes is best.
Are you done with elected politics for good?
Well, I think the key thing is this. I have no intention of running federally, and I believe I am done elected politics for good, subject to what I've said, which is that I've made no decisions about how long I will stay in my position as the MLA for Edmonton Strathcona.
So she seems pretty clear. She's done. She'll hang on until the end of the leadership race. And maybe she'll stay on as the MLA, but from that comment there at the end, it seems pretty clear that even that is up for some question, because she might just say, you know what, see ya. And you know, when somebody has dedicated as much time to her, the people of Alberta as Rachel Notley has, like her or not, the end of the day, anybody who dedicates that much time to public service, anyone who dedicates that much time to public scrutiny. And Lord knows Rachel Notley's been the target for a lot of not just criticism, but outright hate. People have weaponized her, certain rebellious outlets, let's go with, without naming any names, because they're litigious as all hell. I've heard, allegedly. I don't know. But there's been a lot of people who have made a pretty big target of Rachel Notley. So it's entirely understandable that she would say, hey, you know what? I'm good. I'm done. I'm throwing the torch. Maybe the next person pick it up and run with it. But one of the big questions that a lot of people have been speculating on is, well, what are the rules for this leadership race? She said it's happening. Leadership race is coming. What are we looking at here? We've got Catherine Ganley, we've got Sarah Hoffman, we've got David Shepard, we've got a couple other names floating around as maybes. Now, of course, nobody's officially said, but wars kept secrets and all that. So there's people who are definitely interested. What's this race going to look like? And obviously, the question is, what are the rules going to be? A lot of people know that when you have a leadership race, it is, you got to choose a new leader, and that's important and everything. But there's also some other core goals that exist with the leadership race. One of them is you're looking to expand the membership, which means you have to sell memberships. That's one of the things that historically determines whether or not that candidate is going to be able to campaign. if they're going to be able to get people to show up for them. Can they sell the memberships? That's just a part of what a leadership race is. And so there's questions about, well, what if people are trying to sell memberships?
Ask you about a more detailed question. We're going to see a leadership rate. We haven't seen any details or decisions from the party yet. How would you like to see that leadership race play out? What kind of length do you want it, is ideal to you to see a fair race? What kind of rules should be imposed in terms of who can purchase a membership and vote in that race today, for example? What kind of parameters do you want to see so that that race is fair and doesn't get sabotaged by perhaps somebody from outside of the party?
So, listen, this is a matter that will be robustly discussed by our provincial council. They are who have the authority to make those decisions. And so it really does come to the party executive and then the provincial council to make decisions around many of the matters that you've just identified. I think obviously what everybody will want to see is that we have a transparent process that has the trust and integrity of the people who are involved in it. But ultimately, the way you secure that is you respect the process, which is that provincial council will make that decision.
So, to be clear, and we've done some digging, there's a lot of folks who are saying, oh, you have to have owned a membership as of January 16th. There's no evidence of that. And as Rachel Notley herself said there's rules for the leadership race that need to be determined by the NDP's provincial council. So, obviously, those rules have not been publicly released. They haven't been set yet. So everybody who's taking comfort in the notion that, no, it's okay, it has to be people who own their membership as of today, that's not necessarily true at all. In fact, there is no evidence that we've been able to find that that actually will be true. Because like I said, one of the major points of having a leadership race is building the memberships, selling the memberships, getting the data, doing the fundraising, all of those things. And if you're just preaching to the established choir, there's no opportunity for any kind of growth. To say nothing of the fact, it doesn't allow people to get engaged with the process, because if that were true and you're not already a card-carrying NDP member, then you've got no reason to be, because you won't be able to vote in the election. So for all the people out there who are saying, you know what, it's it's the membership as of January 16th, we're safe, we're secure. David Parker and Take Back Alberta, who that clip was so clearly referring to, can't touch us. Well, Rachel Notley said it herself. That'll be up to the provincial council. But Mr. Parker didn't take very long to get involved, to be his typical Parker-esque self. Same day, shortly after Rachel Notley's announcement, as predicted, Rachel Notley has resigned as leader of the NDP. They will be now going into a leadership race. Take Back Alberta will be traveling the province in the coming months, encouraging people to buy memberships of the NDP and make their voices heard. Democracy is the path out of this mess. When the NDP cancel their leadership race, we will know they no longer believe in democracy. Hashtag we are coming. So, pretty on brand, bombastic from the beard, Mr. Parker. But that was only the first shot in the Twitter war of words that came to be, which you know, we've talked to a couple of folks who run comms and do political strategy that are friends of the show, just to make sure that we're not reading this all wrong, and everybody's kind of been like, yeah, that was a shit show. So let's talk about the shit show that occurred, because David Parker tweeted out a little bit later, it's time to take back the Alberta NDP. And that's where things got really interesting, because podcast host, political strategist, and other things, Stephen Carter, retweeted David Parker and said, "Bring it. Time to finally get my shot against you should be easy," which has some pretty fascinating implications, because here's David Parker saying, "I'm going to get involved in the NDP leadership race," and here's Stephen Carter appearing to imply, "I'm already involved in the leadership race. It's going to be the battle of Stephen Carter versus David Parker." Parker responded by saying, "I've waited a long time to prove what a political loser you are. This will be glorious." So already the discourse surrounding the NDP leadership race is of the highest quality and caliber. But it didn't stop there, because David Parker the next day tweeted out, "So, at Carter AB, you're going to be managing Thomas Lukasik's campaign. I wonder how the rank and file of the NDP will feel about a former PC cabinet minister becoming their leader." And of course, you know what's coming next. Stephen Carter then retweeted that and said, "Let's be clear, Davey, I'm not running that campaign." Which again has some interesting implications. You can't just make shit up. If you insist on doing so, I'll be forced to disclose what I know about you and your relations with that. And then it's I believe it's a goat emoji. I'm not sure. "Don't make me do it, Dave," which is, of course, a somewhat interesting phrasing, because "don't make me do it," and then David Parker comes back. We haven't been able to see that he came back at anything. But if he did come back, was like, "I never did anything with that goat," then Stephen Carter would then say, "Oh, you know what? You're right," and escape legal repercussions from Mr. Parker. But this is where it gets really bizarre, because the leadership race hasn't even started yet. We've got David Parker saying that he's going to be involved and trying to sell memberships for the NDP. And then we've got Stephen Carter, who seems to be implying that he's going to be heavily involved in the leadership race, and he's going to take his shot back against David Parker. And you have to wonder if any of this is true, first of all. But if it is true, you have to wonder what the campaign that Stephen Carter's working on, the candidate that Stephen Carter's working with, is thinking, because now their whole campaign has just become not about whether or not Rocky is the best candidate, or Sarah's the best candidate, or Catherine's the best candidate, or David's the best candidate, or even Gil, who knows? It's not about that anymore. It's Stephen Carter's fighting back against David Parker. And where it gets particularly interesting is, this is not a huge shock for either of these guys. David Parker his social media presence has been getting increasingly volatile. It's been getting increasingly hyperbolic. It seems to just be what he does now, is he says the most ignorant thing that he possibly can. We'll get to that in a little bit. But it's worth noting that Mr. Carter is no stranger to the inflammatory tweet either. He was the chief of staff to Danielle Smith, herself, no less, for from what we could say about a whole month before he left the role. And it was allegedly, we're referring heavily, by the way, to the article here from The Sprawl. And I just want to, before I get into this, I want to just say, if you don't follow The Sprawl, if you don't support The Sprawl, even if you don't live in Calgary, The Sprawl tends to be fairly Calgary-centric, but they do such amazing work, and they do such slow burn, long form journalism. If you live in Calgary, the way that they cover municipal issues is second to none. And if you live in the province, they have done some incredible stories on provincial issues that affect the whole province. They did an incredible piece on Jason Kenney in the run-up to the 2019 election. And then they also did this story on Stephen Carter, where they ran through Mr. Carter's entire legacy. So like I said, he was chief of staff to Danielle Smith for about a month before he left the role, allegedly due to tweets where he was mocking Ed Stelmach's accent. He resigned as chief of staff a few days after the Stelmach tweets. It was only a month after Smith had hired him. Ostensibly, the reason was to protect Smith and the party from his debt crisis. He said he could quit before, he said he quit before they could fire him. He also worked for the Mayor Nenshi, the head Nenshi mayoral campaign. And the quote from the sprawl on that campaign is, Nenshi didn't have any loyalty because he didn't recognize my contributions. He then went through a series of roles before he was chief of staff with Alison Redford. And that one also didn't last super long, but it's one of the ones that got a lot of attention because he got a severance role for $130,000. He ran Jody Gondek's campaign and was her chief of staff after the municipal election for 104 days before he was let go. And again, given 104, not 130 this time, he only got $104,000, $104,166.65. And I love that the sprawl reported that specific number. He's the headline of the story. I'm a bad boy. The Stephen Carter story. It's available as both a podcast and as the print version. They don't even know that we're talking about it tonight. This is not a plug. This is just watching Stephen Carter light his hair on fire with David Parker and defining the NDP, one of the NDP leadership candidates, apparently, as being the Stephen Carter candidate is just it brought back memories. But we thought we'd throw a couple of examples up of some of the tweets that these two gentlemen, these two figures of provincial politics have said over the years to illustrate that either of them getting combative on the Twitter machine is not a particularly new thing. We can go back to 2022, January 1st, where Drew Farrell was talking about the problems of homeless, houseless people in the cold and expressing frustration. There were a lot of people who were expressing frustration at this time because the city of Calgary made the decision that they were going to kick people out of shelters, or out of the bus shelters and out of the C-train stations. Stephen Carter responded by saying, or they could go to the shelters. Currently, every shelter has open spaces. Which is, probably fits in well with the current provincial government. I don't know. It seems like maybe when you have the same line as Jason Nixon, that's just a heck of a coincidence. But David Parker. I mean, there's so much to choose from with David Parker. We decided to go with his recent one from January 20th, where he tweeted out, after reading this poster, I have determined that whiteness is awesome. And it's a poster that was published by the NAAHC to talk about aspects and assumptions of whiteness and white culture in the United States. So these are things that people perceive that aren't necessarily, and in some cases certainly, aren't true or shouldn't be defining characteristics of white culture, but they're things that a lot of people seem to believe. Rugged individualism. The individual is the primary unit. Self-reliance. You get what you deserve. The family structure. The husband is the breadwinner and the head of the household. The wife is the homemaker and subordinate to the husband. Worth mentioning at this point that Mr. Parker is in fact married, so that's cool. As he says that he loves the poster so much. History, based on Northern European immigrants' experience in the United States, heavy focus on the British Empire, the primacy of Western Greek, Roman, and Judeo-Christian tradition, the Protestant work ethic. Hard work is the key to success, work before play. If you didn't meet your goals, you didn't work hard enough. So there's lots to talk about in regards to the social media history of these two combatants in the NDP leadership race. But before we leave the Parker piece alone, there was another development that occurred with David Parker and Take Back Alberta this week. So the first piece that we got to talk about, we go back to November. November 23rd, Press Progress released a story where they said Elections Alberta is looking into take back Alberta's finances and donations. The group's former CFO, and I get to say it. Are you ready? Marco Van Hugenbos did an interview. The TBA founder, David Parker, also had his posting privileges in the group's Telegram channel revoked. They had a whole little take back Alberta, little mini civil war thing going on. They've apparently kind of sort of made up. They're at least civil now, allegedly. But David Parker, he didn't like that story from Press Progress. He came out with this little response. I spoke with Elections Alberta today. We are not being audited, nor are we facing an audit. Take Back Alberta is up to date on all of our elections filings, except it doesn't quite look like it worked out quite that way. In a story from independent journalist Jeremy Appel, who we're told Stephen Carter holds in extremely high regard, it turns out Take Back Alberta is actually refusing to cooperate with an Elections Alberta investigation. Mr. Appel listened to and observed a extensive emergency meeting of the Take Back Alberta Belts Society, wherein the David Parker said, hey, so we have these 24 complaints that have been made to Elections Alberta, and we need help. Please help us. But given his historically bombastic approach, his public face was a little bit different, but it also got pretty awesome because he released a statement saying, to be clear, on Twitter, I'm calling Elections Alberta a totally corrupt organization. Elections Alberta is in the back pocket of the unions. Elections Alberta attempted to defraud the Alberta voting public out of fair elections. They've used their position to further their partisan ideological agenda. Elections Alberta is working against its mandate of promoting democratic involvement, as it is in fact discouraging democratic engagement. That Elections Alberta is actively encouraging non-citizens to vote, which is another form of voter fraud. Elections Alberta has decreased trust in the transparency and integrity of our institutions by refusing to address real concerns. And it only took about a day before the community notes feature kicked in. Readers added context. They thought people might want to know. None of these claims are true. Elections Alberta is independent, nonpartisan office of the Legislative Assembly with receipts. Only Canadian citizens and residents of Alberta are eligible to vote in provincial and municipal elections with receipts. So that's super fun. But as easy as it is to make fun of Mr. Parker, and it is so easy to make jokes at Mr. Parker's expense, mostly because he makes it that way, it's important to realize that he's still good at what he does. There is a base of people that buy what he's selling. There's a reason why Tucker Carlson is coming to Edmonton and to Calgary. There's a reason why Danielle Smith has agreed to appear on stage with Tucker Carlson. And it's not because Tucker Carlson is bringing a nuanced and complex view of the world, and Danielle Smith legitimately believes that Tucker Carlson is an individual who has significant impact and influence on the U.S. economy. It's none of that. It's theater. And it's theater for a very specific audience. But COVID-19 left that specific audience highly, highly engaged and highly susceptible to misinformation and disinformation. David Parker knows how to weaponize confirmation bias. He knows how to weaponize the victim complex. He's very, very good at it. He's good enough at it that he was able to push Danielle Smith from a failed radio host who had unhinged rants on her own little web series. To being premier of the province of Alberta. And as easy as it is to make fun of David Parker, it's important to remember that he has made it clear that as much as the NDP leadership race is going to be something for him to mess with and have some fun with, I don't think anybody actually believes that David Parker believes that he's going to be able to have any influence whatsoever on the NDP leadership race. First of all, because those candidates are going to sell tons of memberships. They know the people to talk to. They've already started. All of those machinations are already in place. He's not going to be able to influence the outcome of the NDP leadership race. This is not. What he is going to be able to do is weaponize it. And what he is going to be able to do is continue to build his network. And so when it comes time for him to pursue his stated goal, which is his primary mission, to take over school boards across the province of Alberta, he'll have even more resources to do it with. He'll have identified even more people who can be radicalized and weaponized to do it with. That's what should be scaring everybody about David Parker. Because as much as he is increasingly, apparently, choosing to use, and let's go with unhinged rhetoric on social media, at the end of the day, he's one of the biggest reasons why Danielle Smith is currently the Premier of Alberta. And to pretend that that's not a threat puts Alberta in the same position it was in when Danielle Smith was just a crackpot former radio host who said ridiculous conspiracy theories on the internet. We got two more topics that we're going to hit on before we open it up to the call-in section, and then we're going to call it a night. We're going to do this one first, because this came out just before we went to air, so we kind of threw together a graphic. But going back to the Tucker Carlson piece, this has got to be, like, if this is how the NDP are going to choose to message during the leadership race and for the next 2.5 years, boy, this province is in trouble, because they sent out a fundraising email that is basically like, let's take all of the things and just put it into a hopper and mix it all up and see what comes out. Every time I get my grocery receipt, I do a double take. Costs are out of control. Of course, Danielle Smith has no plans to offer hardworking families relief. Instead, she continues to push the extremist agenda of her dark money donors. So we're not seeing any kind of hyperbolic rhetoric going on here at all. Even more telling, she'll be tearing a Calgary stage with American hate monger Tucker Carlson in less than a week's time. We can't let this happen. Will you help stop it? Chip in by January 23rd to help send a message. Tucker Carlson's toxic views don't belong here, because it's the NDP's protests through fundraising that are going to stop Tucker Carlson for taking the stage. Like, it's just ridiculous. With each passing day, the UCP's priorities become more alarming, cutting our pensions, destroying our parks, dismantling our healthcare system, and now this. By participating in Carlson's extremist roadshow on the 24th, Danielle Smith is openly condemning hateful and harmful rhetoric. These views do not represent us, and we can't allow them to gain a foothold. This movement can achieve incredible results when we speak together with one voice. Tell Tucker Carlson he's not welcome in this province. Make a donation today. It's just like, what are all of the things that we can... What's the most recent Leger poll that we've got out here? And then let's tell people that if they give us money, we can stop Tucker Carlson. It's just so silly that we had to make sure that we hit on it. But before we throw it to the call-in section, 'twas but almost a year ago that we did a special little episode, a one-off. It was a little bit of a deep dive, if you will, on a player in the Canadian media landscape. We're talking, of course, about our True North special, where we took a look at the history of True North. We took a look at the fact that True North exists in complicated ways, and some people say, have managed to, some people say, usurp a charity that was designed to support new immigrants to Canada. They took that over, and they turned that into their news media empire, despite operating as a charity. It's almost as if they did that specifically so they could get all the advantages of being a charity and issue charitable receipts, but still pursue a media news agenda. We talked about the history of the founder of True North and how she worked with Sun Media, and also other people. It's a good episode. We go through, there's a lot of Canadiana media history that's involved in this episode. We took a trip to the head office of True North. We knocked on their door, and no one answered, probably because it's a post office box in a UPS store in downtown Calgary. The headquarters of True North is. It did well. That little episode did. It's one of our most listened to episodes of the year. I had a lot of fun with it. We made some jokes. We had some laughs. It was all good. The poor folks at the UPS store were so confused what was going on. We talked about the packs, the multiple packs that are also run out of the same UPS store. We talked about the connections between Rob Anderson and this UPS store. It's just fascinating how so much of the conservative world operates out of this little UPS store. But here's the thing with that episode. It's been pinned on our Twitter profile for, well, let's take a look here. We posted it on February 3rd of last year, 2023. It's been pinned for an awfully long time. And it's been suggested that perhaps around the time of February 3rd, we should maybe update that pinned tweet. We should maybe revisit that formula. So we're going to in just a couple of weeks. And it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm excited. All of that being said, that is our scheduled content for the show. Now we're going to throw it to the call-in section. But before I do, as I allow our callers to queue up on the Twitter Spaces again, if you're in the chat, if you're watching on the YouTubes or the Facebooks or anything like that, and you take issue or take umbrage with anything that we've presented tonight, then hop on over to Twitter Spaces and tell us how terrible we are, because we don't really police it all that much. We don't have the resources to pre-screen. So if as long as you don't say anything hate speechy, everybody's allowed to come on. We even had Spider-Man on once. It was delightful. But we're going to throw to that in just a minute. But before we do, want to take a second to remind everybody that if you appreciate the kind of content that we're trying to produce here at The Breakdown, we'd love nothing more than if you signed up to be one of our Patreon sponsors at our Patreon site at www.patreon.com/TheBreakdownAB, where for just the price of a fancy cup of coffee, you can help us continue to produce the kind of content that we do and continue to file the FOIPs that we do and all of those other things. So you should visit that website. And if you can't, we get it. Times are tough. There's a lot of people. Things are very tight. That's okay. If you can't make that happen, like and share. Smash that subscribe button, as the kids say. And there's that plug out of the way. So, all of that being said, looks like we got somebody new. I'm intrigued. We'll see how this goes. So we got two of our regular folks in the queue, but we also have somebody new. So I'm going to add Trivial Punk in as a speaker here, and hopefully it's always a bit of an adventure with the new speakers, because sometimes they know that they got to hit the little unmute button in the bottom left hand corner. Sometimes they don't. Hopefully they do. Trivial Punk, what's going on tonight? Yeah, by all means. If you got a list of names. If you had to choose one. There we go. Yeah, absolutely. Yes. we we did a whole thing on that tonight. I mean, when you start to take a look at Take Back Alberta's financial history, one of the things that gets really interesting really quickly is that it gets convoluted very quickly. I mean, the recent stuff with Elections Alberta is really quite interesting, and it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out because there are some pretty interesting legal implications from what's been made publicly available by David Parker. But David Parker also knows that deception has its place. So how much of the stuff from David Parker is actually accurate, don't actually know. But even going back to the beginning of the Take Back Alberta experience, one of the fascinating things when you start to talk about how grassroots it really is when you go back to the original versions of their website, a lot of them referred back to an organization called the Pacific Prosperity Network. I hope I'm getting that name right. And that was actually an organization that was created to try to influence the municipal elections in the West Coast area. So it was kind of like the beta testing ground for a lot of the tactics that were used and are continuing to be used by Take Back Alberta. But what's really wild about it, because there's always, it's like we talk about the children's Tylenol, we got to talk about Dr. Oz's family for some reason. Well, if we're going to talk about the Take Back Alberta and the Pacific Prosperity Network, we apparently have to talk about the founder of Lululemon. So yeah, man, I hear what you're saying. Their financial trail and their whole history is pretty wild. So yeah. Anything else that you wanted to say? What's that? Thanks, man. Appreciate that. All right, so that was Trivial Punk's first time calling in. Thanks for calling in, weighing in there, Trivial Punk. We're gonna go to Chris next, who had one of my favorite tweets of the week, with a graphic on Tucker and Carpe. Chris, what's going on tonight? Just having some fun over here. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you 100%, man. Hmm. Yeah. Um, I don't disagree with anything you're saying. Apparently, as just an aside, the chat is blowing up. Apparently, there's no audio from our callers tonight on the YouTubes and the Facebooks. So I'm not sure what's going on there. We will make sure that the audio gets mixed in because it's for sure being recorded on the Twitter Spaces. Yeah, it's weird. It's all everything's showing is working on our end, so I have no idea what's happening there. But we'll see if we can get that sorted. And for anybody who we're going to keep the call-in section going. If you're not able to hear it, then hop onto the Twitter Spaces, and if push comes to shove, we'll just pull the audio off the Twitter Spaces and bring it back into so everybody can hear it on the podcast side. So it gives everybody who's here on the YouTubes, the video will be reposted with all the audio in there. Well, see, here's the thing, though, is like I think I can speak for everybody here at the show when I say that the call-in stuffs and hearing everybody's different perspective, and certainly all the stories that everybody has shared over the chunk of time that we've been doing this. That is a huge part of the reason why we do this. So yeah, we'll absolutely get this sorted out in the post production, as it were. Okay. Yeah. That's not great. Yeah, you okay, man? You were going on about Leighton and if this is the type of legal representation. It'll be interesting to see. I mean, there was some recent. Oh, sure, pop in there. Yes. Yeah. I mean, the thing that I would say there is like the recent Leger polling has shown that if anything, the support for the idea has dropped. Um, it'll be a rout and it'll be the end of Danielle Smith's leadership. I mean, we have spent a lot of time talking about children's painkillers and fever medication, so that's entirely within the realm of possibility. Yeah. Yeah. But I don't think it would be fascinating to see. I think that they're gonna. I suspect what will probably happen with the pension is they will try to continue to build up the support that they're very clearly trying to build up with in Edmonton. And I mean, I know a lot of people look at Edmonton as kind of being the fortress NDP, but it's only been that way for about less than 10 years. And the reality is, you take a look at how many different places that they're trying to pursue policies in Edmonton. I mean, they're talking about the crime, they're talking about the homelessness and the houselessness. They're focusing a lot of their energies on Edmonton. So I suspect what they're probably going to continue to try to do is find inroads into Edmonton, and then depending on the leadership candidate that comes out of this NDP leadership race, I mean, it's going to be an all or nothing type situation, because if the NDP bring in somebody who isn't able to go toe to toe with Danielle Smith, then they're going to have some very, very real problems. And it's going to be fascinating to see how that plays out. I don't know how it's going to work. Because if the UCP continue to hammer on Edmonton for look at how great we are in safety and security and all of that, and the NDP elect a leader that can't go toe to toe with Smith, Fortress Edmonton is going to, you take a look at the voting history for Edmonton, it has not always been NDP, and it can go very easily back to not being NDP without too much work. Particularly if the NDP continue to send out fundraising emails like the one that I read earlier. Yeah, thanks, Chris. I'm going to bring in our next speaker. We've got Progressive Albertan. Here I am making fun of the NDP comms, and we apparently can't get our audio working for the call-in, so I'm going to make that joke myself first. But Progressive Albertan, what's going on tonight? Hey. Okay. I don't think anyone would argue that the reality of a proportional representation system isn't a good thing. I mean, it's very clearly in many ways there's a lot of benefits to a proportional representation system, but the problem with the proportional representation system is that it benefits the people and not the politicians. So as we saw with the Liberals, they were all like, oh, we're going to bring in proportional representation, and then they got elected and they went, or we maybe just this power's nice, we like this, we'll keep doing this. So the challenge is, and this is one of the reasons why I liked, Jordan Wilkie with the Green Party in the last provincial election. They didn't get very much. I mean, they beat the Alberta Party. Yeah, but their whole platform was, hey, if you vote for the Green Party, we'll bring in proportional representation, and then we'll immediately hold an election. They had positions on a lot of other issues that Albertans were concerned about, but the fact that they were willing to make that commitment, I respected the Stones on that. I don't think that it's gonna happen anytime soon, if ever, because the problem is that, as the saying goes, power corrupts, and you get people in who have the best of intentions, and then they just don't get it done. I mean, it'll be interesting because, I mean, the way that the rules work for the redistribution is that we still have to have the same number of constituencies. So the number of ridings or constituencies isn't going to change. The other piece that gets to be particularly important is, while they, ideally, in everybody's head, it should be the same number of people equal the same number of MLAs. But the reality is that they have all kinds of fascinating little rules in regards to natural barriers and natural lines, and where can you cross those and everything. Like I'll use my constituency that I live in as an example. There was a lot of uproar when this constituency was created because a lot of people said, hey, if you take a look at this side of Deerfoot, it uses completely different infrastructure. It uses completely different transit. It has completely different issues when you compare it to that side of Deerfoot that you've now paired us with, that again uses completely different infrastructure. It has completely different issues. Why are you mashing these two together as one big constituency? And there's a lot of people who said, well, political expediency is a really good answer. But that's the reality of it. So there's the challenge of the I don't think we're going to see any major changes to the map. They tend to make very, very small changes, and it's being done by people who, it's bipartisan, if you will. But it's being done by people who have a vested interest in the least amount of change possible. And there's formulas and junk. We took a look at this a while back, and it turns into well, here's what the justifications that are publicly offered are, and here's what the backrooms discussions are. And I mean, I think even we touched on it with Thomas Lukasik. And the amount of bargaining that goes on between current MLAs and the people on the committee, it's politics, man. It wouldn't take much, but I mean, gerrymandering by politicians? What? Yeah, anything else you want to throw in there, man? Yeah. Which is wild to me because if you take a look at the history of the NDP, it is, and this is it's fascinating to me that this isn't something that the NDP have more aggressively hopped on, because if you take a look at the history of the NDP, it is a party of farmers. It's a party of rural Alberta, um, and or rural Canada, and for the NDP to have moved away from that history of being the party of the rural to being the party of the Edmonton is wild to me. Yeah. Yeah. We'll see what we see. It could be interesting. It'll be interesting to see when that election happens. I know there's some people who are speculating, oh, it's going to come any day now. And I don't see any benefit to the Liberals calling an election anytime soon because for them because they lose everything, and it'll be a hell of a way for Trudeau to leave. I suspect that, if I was Justin Trudeau. The way that I would want to handle this is I would want to give it a little bit of time, and then I would probably declare in the same fashion that Rachel Notley has. I would probably declare a leadership race for the Liberals, but I would probably time it so it ended right near the 6 months before the scheduled election, anyways. There's a reason why I suspect with the NDP leadership race, we're going to see a fairly long race, because it's free campaigning, it's free media. And if I was Justin Trudeau, I'd be pushing things out as far as I could, and then I would say, "Tag, you're it," and go from there. So, you're not wrong. Well, thanks, man. And I'm not going to be endorsing anyone as we go through this process, because that takes all of the fun out of it. And, quite frankly, Catherine Ganley is pretty clear she's running for leadership. I mean, she's been doing a leadership campaign for a while now, but whether or not it actually, who else throws in? I don't think we're going to see Janice Irwin throw in. No, I wish. I think Janice Irwin is so authentic, and that's the two things that I look for from a politician that I'll be like, oh, I think you might be doing something interesting, is authenticity and a mind at work. And I think she has both of those things in abundance. But I just don't think that neither Alberta or, quite frankly, the NDP are ready for her as a leader. Cool. Thanks, man. Well, you have a good night, and maybe we'll see you next week. All right. I'm going to bring in Lynn, and then we're going to go to Cassandra, and then I'm going to shut it down there because with the audio's not working, then it's, the longer that we go, the longer we're going to have to go back and capture everything, and it's going to turn into a chore. So, Lynn, what's going on tonight? One of those guys. I don't know. I'm good. Yep. Yeah. Oh. Well, I mean, I went before we started the show. I went to see if you could still get tickets for Calgary and Edmonton, and you can for both. So as much as they're all Calgary sold out, the ticket places don't seem to think so. So, I I don't think that's the thing at all. Um, yep. Oh, wow. Good choice. Good choice. Awesome. Thanks, Lynn. Hope things are doing well for you. All right. All right. We're going to end up with Cassandra, and that will be the end of tonight's show, and we'll wrap it up there. So, Cassandra, closing thoughts. What do you got? Yeah. Oof. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep. It's gross. Yeah. No, he's said that a couple of times. That clip is in circulation. I think the challenge that they would probably have with using that as a legal block is that because he has said so many things that are demonstrably false, and because he has a established legal history of this caricature that he plays when he's hosting things, not being connected with his actual views. I mean, that's one of the things that came out of the Dominion lawsuit is Tucker Carlson says one thing and then he says a completely opposite thing. Yep. I mean, I don't think that he should be stopped at the border, and that's probably something that I'll pay for saying a little bit. But I don't think he should be stopped at the border. I think he should be allowed to come here. I think that he should be allowed to speak. I think that if he breaches the Canadian Criminal Code, he should be arrested and charged appropriately. What I think needs to happen more than anything, though, is because like we got lots of bigots here too. We got no shortage of. Yeah, for sure. Oh, I don't disagree that it's gross. I think it is super gross. I think that Tucker Carlson is a reprehensible human being. I think that he deliberately misleads people. I think that he's deliberately dishonest because it makes him money. I think that he is, yeah, he's bad for democracy. But at the same time, I think the problem that we're having is like if Tucker Carlson was coming to Edmonton and Calgary, and I mean, I think the turnout in Edmonton and the seating problems in Edmonton largely speak for themselves. But it should not be a case where the Premier of Alberta is fangirling so hard that she wants to do the event so she can share a stage with Tucker Carlson, because, well, exactly. Yeah, but that I think is where the problem is that we have leadership that is providing legitimacy that they absolutely shouldn't be, and that's so like I don't want to say, if somebody's like go beat up that guy because he's whatever. Yeah, no, now you're breaking the law, and you should be prosecuted with the full force of the law in this country because we got laws against hate speech. But if you want to come up and say dumb conspiracy theories, you're allowed to say dumb conspiracy theories. The problem that we have in this province right now is that the institutions that are supposed to publicly and clearly say, well, that's bullshit, are afraid and or complicit. And that's what the problem is. So I'm far more interested in investing my energy in saying, hey, the Premier of Alberta is complicit in amplifying this bullshit, and that's a problem we need to talk about, rather than investing my energy in trying to say, hey, we shouldn't let that guy come up here because, I don't know, it's just, to me, it's, if you're going to believe in the principles of freedom of expression and all of that, I think that even when it's uncomfortable, you have to be willing to say, okay, so you get to say you're dumb shit, but I get to stand up and say, that's dumb shit. Yeah. We are dangerous. Like, we do share a large border with Montana. I'm sure there's lovely people in Montana too. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, to me, I think the best way to deal with Tucker Carlson's invasion threats is to, like, get the message out that really, if what you want to do is, if you're going to invade Canada, you want to do it in July or August. That's the peak invasion time, because then we're going to get a boatload of Americans showing up on the border with like parkas and snow pants, and they're going to get 20 feet before they sweat too much and pass out. So, like, there's strategies that we can use, is all I'm saying. Well, Cassandra, I want to thank you for weighing in tonight, and we're coming up to the 2.5 hour mark, so I'm going to shut it down. But thank you for weighing in with your perspective as always. Oh, thank you. Thank you. That's very kind. And we will get the audio fixed so that their voices can be heard on the podcast, and we'll repost all the videos as well so that it goes up there. Because I don't know what's going on. I got, like, all the little meters are doing all the things they're supposed to do over here, but it's apparently not working. So we'll get it figured out. But that's it. That's the show, everybody. Thank you so much. To everybody who tuned in, thank you to everybody who watched on the Twitter machine, on the Facebook machine, on the YouTubes. Thank you to everybody who listened on the Twitter Spaces, and especially everybody who engaged on the Twitter Spaces. Thank you so much for that. We will be back in 1 week. We're going to do another live show next Sunday. And like I said, we've got another little special little deep dive thinger we're going to be doing on a certain media organization. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to it. And that's about it. So, like I said, though, we take a look at the legislative session. Now the time's to rest up because we know Danny's getting back. I think she gets back allegedly tomorrow from her vacation. And it's going to be, the guns, they'll be ablazing pretty quick. And we have 15 weeks of legislative session, which is like 3 times as much as it was last year. So they're going to be doing the thing. So rest up, catch your breath, and get ready because there's going to be a lot going on in politics in the province of Alberta. And the more eyes that are on it, the better. And remember, as much as it's super easy to dismiss David Parker and make fun of him, the dude does know how to do the things, and he is a real threat, and he says he wants to mess with school boards and public education. So don't get complacent just because he's having a nutty. That's it, everybody. Take care of yourselves, as always, and keep the conversation going.